18 years ago, three innocent souls were left behind because their appearance didn't match their parents. Rejected at birth and abandoned without hesitation, their future seemed bleak, but fate had other plans in store. You won't believe how this tale unfolds. Stay with us and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories. At St. Joseph's Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina, three cries rang out in the delivery room, filling the air with the raw sound of new life. Triplets, a boy and two girls, entered the world, their tiny faces full of innocence, their skin a deep, rich brown that glowed under the hospital's fluorescent lights. The nurses smiled, wrapping them in soft blankets, ready to hand them to their parents' eager arms. But the joy vanished when Thomas and Margaret Carter laid eyes on them. Elizabeth's breath hitched, her eyes widening in shock. She looked to her husband for reassurance, but found only cold disbelief. Thomas stood stiff, his face pale, fists clenched. He didn't step closer or speak. His silence was heavy, stifling the room. "They're beautiful," a nurse whispered, trying to break the tension, but her words fell flat. Elizabeth's shoulders slumped, her body trembling as she stared at the babies again. Their skin, so much darker than hers or Thomas's, seemed to challenge everything she believed. She reached out, her fingers pausing, then drew back, her heart twisting painfully. Thomas's voice sliced through the silence, cold and final. "We need time to think," he said sharply, leaving no room for discussion. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Elizabeth watched him go, her chest tightening, her world crumbling. She didn't follow, she couldn't. Her feet felt glued to the floor, her mind numb with disbelief. The nurses exchanged worried looks. They tried to place the babies in Elizabeth's arms, but she shook her head, her eyes distant and vacant. I just need a moment," she whispered before turning away, her shoulders hunched in defeat. The nurses took the triplets to the nursery, placing them side by side in a single crib. Their tiny hands reached out, finding each other, clinging to the only warmth they knew. But no one came to hold them, to whisper promises of love or comfort. They were alone. That night, Thomas and Elizabeth made their choice. They refused to see the babies again and signed away their parental rights, their names scribbled quickly across documents that felt cold and final. "It's impossible," Thomas muttered, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor. "They can't be ours." His desire was fierce, a shield against a truth he couldn't face. Elizabeth's heart broke as she signed her name, tears blurring her vision. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to understand how this could happen, but her voice was gone, swallowed by fear and shame. She set the pen down and walked away, her body hollow, her soul heavy. She didn't look back, and neither did Thomas. The hospital staff watched them leave, whispers spreading through the halls. Some spoke of hidden genetics, ancient ancestry resurfacing unexpectedly. Others murmured about fear and shame, about a man unable to accept children who didn't mirror his image. But no one truly understood, no one could. The triplets were left behind, nameless and alone, their cries echoing in the nursery. Nurses took turns holding them, whispering soft lullabies, trying to fill the void left by parents who couldn't stay. But they knew it wasn't enough. Love from strangers couldn't heal the wound of abandonment. Days passed, and the story spread through the hospital, whispered with pity and disbelief. Three perfect, innocent infants cast aside because they didn't look like the parents who created them. There was quiet concern about their future. Who had taken three babies at once, especially with the scandalous story already tied to their names? Would they be separated, their bond broken before they even knew the world? For now, the triplets lay together, their tiny fingers entwined, their breathing in sync. They had no names, no identity beyond each other. But they weren't broken, not yet. Their journey was just beginning, and the world was about to show them that love could come from the most unexpected places. In Somerville, news traveled fast, and whispers of 3 abandoned babies reached David and Rachel Harper quickly. 3 infants left behind, not because of illness or poverty, but because they didn't resemble their parents. It seemed cruel, unfair, but it was real. Naomi's heart sank as she heard the story. David saw the pain in her eyes, the familiar ache that had haunted them for years. They had tried for so long, prayed for a family, but their arms remained empty until now. "They need us," Naomi said, her voice trembling. David knew then that they would go, that they would see the babies, that their lives were about to change. They arrived at St. Joseph's Medical Center, nervous but resolute. A nurse led them to the nursery, her expression soft with hope. "They've been together since birth," she explained. "They only sleep when they're touching. It's like they already know they need each other." David and Naomi stood over the crib, gazing at 3 tiny faces, peaceful and perfect, a boy and 2 girls. Their dark eyes were closed, their fingers curled around each other's hands. Naomi's heart swelled, tears pricking her eyes. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the boy's soft cheek. "Ethan," she whispered. The name felt right, like it was always meant for him. David's voice was rough with emotion as he looked at the first girl, her tiny lips curved in a gentle sigh. "Sophie," he murmured, his heart tightening. The third lay close, her face serene, her body pressed against her sister's. "Zara," Naomi whispered, her voice breaking. "Our little Zara." 3 names, 3 souls who needed them. David felt his chest tighten, his decision solidifying. "All 3, he said, his voice firm. "They stay together. We're their family now." Naomi nodded, her tears falling silently. "Yes, all 3. Within weeks, the adoption was finalized. They brought the triplets home to Somerville, knowing their lives would never be the same. The triplets grew surrounded by love and security. Ethan was gentle and empathetic, always the first to comfort his sisters. Sophie was curious, her eyes wide with wonder, always asking questions. Zara was bold, her laughter filling the house, her spirit unbreakable. They were happy, thriving, loved. But the world was waiting, ready to question their place, their identity. David and Naomi knew the questions would come, knew the stares would follow, but they were ready. They would face it together as a family. The world would have its doubts, but their love was unwavering. They were the Turners now, bound not by blood but by choice, by commitment, by love. The triplets grew up surrounded by love. To them, David and Naomi were simply mom and dad. They didn't think about skin color until the world forced them to. At school, questions started innocently. "Why don't you look like your parents? Are you adopted?" The triplets shrugged them off, but the stares grew heavier, whispers more pointed. They heard the word different too often, spoken with a tone that felt like judgment. By age 10, the questions came home with them. Sophie's eyes were wet when she asked, "Why don't we look like you?" Her voice was small, fragile, as if afraid of the answer. David's chest tightened. He had known this day would come, but was still unprepared for the pain in her eyes. He pulled her close, his arms firm, his heart breaking. "Because love doesn't look like anything," he said softly. "It feels like this." Naomi wrapped her arms around them both, her voice steady. "We chose you. That's what matters." But Sophie's eyes held questions they couldn't answer, doubts they couldn't erase. The triplets faced stares wherever they went. Neighbors watched too closely, strangers whispered behind polite smiles. They felt the weight of curiosity, of judgment. The whispers grew sharper as they got older, suspicion and misunderstanding twisting into prejudice. "Are they really yours?" someone asked once, eyes narrowed. David's jaw tightened, his chest burning with anger, but he answered calmly, "Yes, they are ours." He held his head high, refusing to justify his family to strangers who couldn't see beyond skin color. But the damage was done. The triplets heard the questions, absorbed the doubts. They began to wonder where they truly belonged. Sophie turned to books, searching for answers in pages filled with history and identity. Ethan grew quiet, his eyes thoughtful, his shoulders heavier. Zara fought back with boldness, her chin high, defiance in her eyes. But at night, she would curl up beside Sophie, her voice small. "They're wrong, right?" she'd whisper. Sophie would hold her tight, her heart heavy. "Yeah, they're wrong." But the fear lingered. David and Naomi saw the questions growing, saw the pain their children carried. They did their best to shield them, but they couldn't change the world's prejudice. They could only stand firm, loving fiercely, refusing to let ignorance break them apart. As teenagers, Ethan, Sophie, and Zara excelled. Ethan poured his emotions into music, Sophie devoured knowledge, and Zara's speed on the track left crowds speechless. But their successes didn't silence the questions, it only magnified the whispers. Where did they come from? Why don't they look like their parents? The judgments were silent but heavy, lingering in every stare. The triplets felt the weight of being different, of not fitting into society's narrow expectations. Ethan became quieter, his laughter fading. Sophie's curiosity grew sharper, her questions more pointed. Zara's boldness turned defensive, anger simmering beneath her bright smiles. They were loved, they were cherished, but they were lost. One evening, sitting around the dinner table, Sophie's voice broke the silence. "Why did they leave us?" The words hung heavy, unanswered. Ethan looked at his hands, his fingers tightening. Who are they? Do they even care? Zara's jaw clenched, her eyes fierce. We need to know. David and Naomi had prepared for this moment, but it didn't ease the pain. They shared the truth, raw and honest. Your birth parents, they chose to leave. But that choice was theirs, not yours. You were always enough. You are enough, David said, his voice wavering, his eyes pleading for them to understand. Naomi's fingers gripped his, her resolve steady. But the answers weren't enough. The triplets needed closure, needed to face the shadows of their past. They looked at each other, unspoken words passing between them. Ethan's shoulders straightened, his eyes steady. We have to find them. Sophie and Zara nodded, determination hardening their faces. They needed the truth, no matter how painful. David's heart clenched, fear tightening his chest, but he saw the resolve in their eyes, the courage that refused to back down. We'll help you, he said quietly. We'll face this together. Naomi's voice was soft but fierce. We are a family. That won't change, no matter what. Determined to find closure, Ethan, Sophie, and Zara searched for their biological parents. They needed answers to understand who they were and why they were left behind. With David and Naomi's support, they found the names, Thomas and Margaret Carter. They sent a letter, brief and direct. We are your children. We need to know why you left us. Weeks passed in silence until a reply came. We will meet you. It's time for the truth. They arrived at a modest house in Charleston, hearts pounding. Thomas opened the door, his face cold and guarded. Elizabeth stood behind him, her eyes full of fear and guilt. There were no hugs, no words of welcome, only silence. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady but heavy with pain. Why did you leave us? The question cut through the air, demanding answers. Thomas looked away, his jaw clenched. We were ashamed, he admitted, his voice hollow. We were afraid of what people would say, afraid of facing questions we couldn't answer. Zara's eyes narrowed, anger flashing. So you abandoned us? Her voice was sharp, disbelief turning to pain. We were babies. We needed you. Sophie's lips trembled, her voice cracking. You left us alone because you were ashamed. Elizabeth's shoulders sagged, tears streaming down her face. We were scared, she whispered, her voice fragile. We were weak, and we chose the easy way out. Her words were heavy with guilt, her body trembling under the weight of her choices. Ethan's face was pale, his chest tightening. We grew up wondering why we weren't enough, he said quietly, his voice breaking. We thought it was our fault. His words were raw, vulnerable, the pain of 18 years echoing through each syllable. Thomas's eyes closed, his shoulders sinking. It was our fault, not yours. We were selfish cowards, he said, his eyes wet, his face crumpling. We were wrong. Silence followed, cold and suffocating. Sophie's tears fell, her fingers tightening into fists. Zara's jaw clenched, her anger giving way to grief. Ethan's shoulders sagged, his heart breaking and healing all at once. We didn't need perfection, Ethan said, his voice soft but firm. We just needed parents. Sophie wiped her tears, her eyes dark. You let your shame be more important than your children. Zara's voice was cold, final. You left us, but we found love without you. They turned to leave, their heads high, their pain heavy but no longer crushing. Elizabeth's sobs echoed behind them, her guilt raw and unrelenting. Thomas stood motionless, his face pale, his choices haunting him. But the triplets didn't look back. They walked out, stepping away from the past, from the pain, from the shadows that had followed them. David and Naomi were waiting, their arms open, their faces filled with love and relief. Ethan leaned into David's hug, his body trembling, his heart full. Sophie cried into Naomi's shoulder, her tears falling freely, her burden finally lifting. Zara stood strong, her eyes fierce, her soul healing. As they drove away, the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretching long, but the light followed them, warm and steady, guiding them home. Ethan's voice was soft, almost a whisper. We were always enough. Sophie took his hand, her fingers squeezing his. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, her eyes closing, peace finally settling in. They had faced the past, and together they would build their future. The confrontation changed them. Ethan, Sophie, and Zara walked away with pain, but also clarity. They knew now that they were not defined by the parents who left them, but by the ones who chose them. They were Turners, bound by love, not blood. Ethan returned to his music, his melodies stronger, bolder. Sophie wrote with passion, her words powerful and fearless. Zara ran faster, her laughter echoing, her spirit unbreakable. They had found strength in their pain, purpose in their identity. At school, the stares and whispers continued, but they no longer mattered. The triplets walked tall, side by side, united. They knew who they were. They belonged. They were enough. On graduation day, they stood together, faces bright with hope. Ethan was headed to music school, Sophie to journalism, Zara to national competitions. Their futures were limitless, their dreams alive. David and Naomi watched with tears of pride. They had fought for this family, loved fiercely, stood firm. They had chosen these children and would choose them again every day. That night, they sat around the dinner table, laughter and love filling the room. Ethan's voice broke the silence, his eyes soft. Thank you for choosing us. David's voice cracked, his heart full. You were always meant to be ours. Sophie smiled, her heart light. We are enough. Zara's voice was fierce, her head high. We are Turners, strong. They had faced the truth, embraced their identity, and found their place. Their story was proof that family is not just about blood, but about choice, love, and commitment. They were unbreakable. They were home. Is family defined by the blood we share or by the love that stands by us through every trial? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of love. We'll see you next time.